Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Ministry Goals series. It's great to see you all, and I really do hope that you have been surviving and thriving through these past really difficult months. With our Ministry Goals series, what we are wanting to do is find our purpose, get God's direction, and re-energize our passion for ministry, even in times of crisis and uncertainty. And as we consider real issues that are facing society today, we can also learn how we as a church can be the agents of positive change. I'm very excited to have our presenters with us today, who I'll share about them soon. But this topic that we're discussing today is something that I think hits very close to many of us. So we're going to start with a very quick poll. I hope you've used the poll device on your Zoom meetings before. You're going to see a poll, and we'll put question 1 up right now. You'll see a poll question pop up on your screen, and you can very easily answer the question by clicking one of the answers. And the question is, do you know someone who has struggled emotionally since the COVID-19 pandemic started? So just yes, no, or not sure. Do you know someone who has struggled emotionally since the pandemic started? So go ahead and put your answer in there. We'll give just a couple more seconds for you to enter your answer. And let's go ahead and close our poll now. And Phil, you can show us our results as well. So 81% of us know someone who has struggled emotionally in the past few months. Now, of course, that could mean very many different things, but we know someone who has had this struggle. Let's go to the next poll question. Question number 2. Have you struggled emotionally since the COVID-19 pandemic started? By the way, I should have said this at the beginning. Both of these questions are completely anonymous. There's no way we can trace it back to who answered how. So please just share honestly as we enter into this conversation today about recovery from emotional trauma. Go ahead and close this question as well, and we'll share the results. So 64% of us right here in this meeting today have struggled emotionally over the past 4 months or a few months. This is not something that is isolated. This is certainly something that is fairly common, as we can see. So what we want to do today is talk about this issue of emotional trauma and how we as a church can minister to this need. I'm very excited. I'm going to introduce our first presenter, and then we'll have an opening prayer to begin, and then we'll introduce our second presenter. So Dr. David Sedlacek is Professor of Family Ministry and Discipleship at the Seventh-day Adventist Theological Seminary at Andrews University. He received his master's and doctorate in social work from Case Western Reserve University in Cleveland, Ohio. He has worked in various settings, both public and private, as clinician, researcher, teacher, pastor, and administrator. And he has worked extensively in the areas of addiction, abuse, relationships, marriage, and family. And together with his wife, Dr. Beverly Sedlacek, he has written a book entitled Cleansing the Sanctuary of the Heart, Tools for Emotional Healing, along with its accompanying workbook. And I'm very pleased to now turn over the time to my friend and colleague, Dr. David Sedlacek, once we have a prayer by Philip Riley. Thank you so much for being with us today.
Let's pray. Lord, we really are honored to be able to put aside this time and to meet with this virus going on. It's great that we have the technology and the ability to come together. And I pray right now that this will be a time of growth, a time of learning, and a time of coming together. And I pray especially that you'll be with Derrick and David, that you'll bless them and the presentations that they have, and let it be an opportunity for us to really grow. Thank you for this time and for each person being able to join today. In your name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Amen. Thank you, Angie, Philip, thank you so much for allowing me the privilege to come on today and to share some thoughts about dealing with our emotions, dealing with trauma during times of stress. I want to share this from both a professional as well as a biblical point of view in the context of Adventist Recovery Ministries. And so I'm going to attempt to do that today. So I want to begin taking a look at the one stressor that is common to all of us or most of us right now, which is COVID-19, emotions, trauma. So people who struggle with COVID-19 sometimes face the possibilities of both, I might get it. That's why we're using our protective devices, as Angie mentioned earlier, and possibly our loved ones getting sick or even facing death. You know, many of us have, vulnerabilities, physical vulnerabilities. Some of us, like me, are older, and so we have to even be more careful of who we expose ourselves to, and so we wear masks and do physical distancing. But those possibilities are always there. Therefore, we're living with a certain amount of anxiety, no matter what we do to protect ourselves, that it could happen to us. And coming to terms with that is very real. Some of us have lost work. There are many people who are unemployed or who are less employed, have less income, and therefore less ability to care for our families, or we might be working from home. We don't even go into the office. Angie mentioned this is her first day back in the office. So we work from home. Therefore, there's more isolation. Those of us who have children, our children are home from school, and there's a debate about that in the fall, whether our kids are going to be going back and to what degree they're going to be going back. How is that going to impact my work schedule? And so all of those questions, and even if I'm trying to work from home, but also teach my kids from home, that adds additional stresses. Long lines from people seeking food. You've seen them on television, or you've been a part of them yourselves, or even trying to get tested when you feel like you need to be tested. You've been exposed. So all of those are sources of anxiety and potential trauma. And of course, the loneliness of not being able to be at church like we normally would, and to hug people, and to be next to our friends, and to really connect with people face to face. It's different connecting via Zoom or our computers than it is face to face. And our loss of family rituals, our church routines, all of those things have an impact on us. And so it's important to recognize that it does impact each and every one of us. Some of us feel it more, as our survey showed, than others might feel it or experience it, but nonetheless, it's very real. And it looks as if it may not go away anytime soon. So adjusting to that. Some people are more resilient than other people. They adjust more easily. Other people less so, and we'll talk a little bit more why that's so. So what are some complicating factors that make it even harder for people to adjust to present struggles like what's going on now? Some people have histories of untreated trauma from their past. 2/3 of our population report having one or more adverse childhood experiences, according to the ACE, or Adverse Childhood Experiences Study. And a lot of this, if we've not embraced it, if we've not got counseling or been able to talk about it, still is unfinished. So things like a history of physical abuse, or emotional abuse or sexual abuse, neglect of our basic needs, domestic violence in the home in which we were raised, whether it was toward one of our parents or even toward us, addiction in a family member. How many of us are ACAs? How many of us, in addition to me, were raised with an alcoholic parent? If we have mental illness, a parent who was chronically depressed or anxious or schizophrenic or some other mental illness. Have there been suicide attempts in a family member, or having a family member up in prison, or divorce in parents has been shown to be a high source of trauma in children who experience that. So these are complicating traumatic histories that may have been experienced in childhood that add to our emotional dysregulation right now, our emotional difficulties, and dealing even with things that are happening in the present. Other complicating factors, some people have experienced post-traumatic stress disorder. For example, if you might have been in the military. I'm a first responder, and if you go onto calls and you're the first responder there and you come upon someone who's dead, a dead body. I mean, all of those kinds of things add to even adult possibilities of PTSD. Other adult traumas or losses that we've experienced, divorce can be traumatic as an adult, losses of parents. Many of us my age, our parents are either very, very ill or are very, have passed away or are experiencing serious illness at this point in their lives. So personal traumas or challenges, I work in the seminary, and a lot of our seminarians surprisingly struggle to trust God because of unresolved childhood issues. I know when I was working the third step for myself, one of the real issues I faced was as hard as I tried to work that step, it was hard for me because I had a hard time really trusting God because of my issues with my father. And God helped me see that and begin working through those things. Poor differentiation, in other words, not really having a solid sense of myself, not knowing myself, not caring for myself well, being disconnected from myself. Again, if I'm trying to connect with God, trying to connect with other people in relationships, but I'm still disconnected from myself, it's not going to bode well in terms of being able to emotionally be settled with myself. Having family conflict. And again, the research shows that family conflict during times of COVID is going up. Domestic violence is going up. We'll talk more about that. If I don't know how to communicate well, if I don't have good assertion or conflict resolution skills, what it means is that it's going to create more difficulties during times of stress and tension. And of course, we have, as we know, a lot of racial tension these days and that come from racial disparities. And so I want to share some of that with you. We're involved in the Black Lives Matter movement that's on the news a lot these days. And, with the death of this fine man, Congressman John Lewis, and the funeral that was yesterday, that was very, very touching. I mean, he worked all his lifetime for racial equality, but we can see that when it comes to addiction, substance abuse, the vulnerabilities, 88% of minorities, of African Americans, have less access to treatment than Caucasians do. 69% have less access to any mental illness. In the co-occurring mental illness and substance abuse disorder, 91% have less access to treatment. And that's something that we need to be sensitive to. When it comes to our Latino brothers and sisters, the results show that 90% of them almost have less access to substance abuse treatment, and 67% less access to mental health treatment, and 93% 93% have less access to co-occurring mental illness or substance abuse treatment. And so we need to recognize that in our groups, if we have minorities like African Americans or Hispanics, that, that this may be the only treatment that they have access to, are 12-step groups. And so it's really important. Vulnerable migrant workers are another vulnerable population. There's been a new report analyzing in California, the county's daily COVID-19 cases against the industry in which each person works and was employed. He found that as of July 1, the prevalence of COVID-19 for agricultural workers was 1,410 positive cases out of 100,000, while the rate for workers in all other industries was 455 per 100,000, a difference of almost 1,000 cases more than the general population. I mean, that higher rate of infection and vulnerability is because of their living conditions. Often you have many families living in one single room, or we have people unable, while they are engaging in their agricultural work, unable to do any kind of social distancing. You know, when they're traveling to the fields, they're all in these trucks together. When they're in the fields, it's hard, you know, to maintain social distancing sometimes. So Native Americans also, you know, as of May 11th, American Indian, American Native people made up 18% of the deaths and 11% of the cases, compared to 4% of the total population in Arizona, and 57% of cases compared to 9% of the total population in New Mexico, 30% of the cases compared to 2% of the total population in Wyoming. As of May 10th, the Indian Health Service reported nearly 5,500 positive cases from IHS tribal and urban Indian facilities, including over 33,000 among the Navajo Nation, which spans Arizona, Mexico, Utah. So understanding that there are vulnerable population groups, and, you know, Angie, you know, Ray, I don't even know if we have any of our groups. Maybe someone can share it with us after we're done with our presentations, but I don't know if anyone, if we have any groups in any of our Native American groups, or predominantly African-American churches or Latino churches. And again, those might be target groups for us to, you know, to pay special attention to when it comes to our Journey to Wholeness meetings. Now, not only that, but there's an anger pandemic that research is showing right now. Americans are getting angrier because of COVID-19, and we see that all over on the news. The Washington Post published an article on the anger incubator on mom rage in the pandemic in its July 16th edition. With the threat of COVID-19 stacked upon seemingly endless quarantine, job losses, social unrest, fears and frustrations have erupted into a rage that is being unleashed at alarming levels. Social media feeds are filled with hateful rants. I mean, you've seen them, or heard about them. Anger about having to wear a mask, anger at people who refuse to wear a mask, anger directed at governments and organizations, or at those who are angry at home, hot tempers, more domestic violence, shorter fuses, explosive outbursts are becoming more common the longer people are cooped up without any relief. The risks of unrestrained anger are ruinous for relationships, you know, family dynamics and physical health, higher risk of heart disease. Again, these results are based upon research findings. Increased risk for stroke when people are chronically angry. You know, certainly in the higher risk for stroke is there, 3 times greater for stroke in 2 hours following an angry outburst. Weakened immune system, you know, as a result of our anger. So we're more vulnerable to not only COVID-19, but to other illnesses as well because of a weakened immune system. So these are all risks of our unrestrained anger. In decreased lung function, you know, increased anxiety, and we're going to talk about anxiety again shortly, that anger worsens generalized anxiety disorder, as well as links to other mental health like issues like depression, ADHD, personality disorders, as well as substance abuse, which I'm going to address in a little while again. So, is your anxiety out of control related to COVID-19? Let's take a look at some anxiety-related factors. So, is your sleep disrupted? You know, if you're having a harder time sleeping, that could be connected to increased anxiety. So understanding that, you know, finding regular sleep rhythms and even if you need to, taking some natural things to help with sleep. If you get, research shows that if you get less than 7 hours of sleep a night, that increases your anxiety. Having trouble catching your breath. You know, some people who are anxious have a hard time, you know, just catching their breath and learning how to just take time to breathe, take a moment to breathe. I know I have a device on my arm that tells me periodically, David, take time to take a deep breath. It shows up on my screen. It's like, okay, you know, I can do that. And so it's something to be aware of. Having an ant infestation. Now, this isn't little creatures. This is automatic negative thoughts that are in your brain, that automatically come into your head, you know, that are negative, especially if they're repetitive and you have a hard time, you have a harder time getting them out of your thoughts and you begin ruminating upon them. You know, when you have those automatic negative thoughts, knowing how to deal with those things is really effective. You know, it's important to be able to identify your negative thoughts and then use a positive thought, especially if it's a shaming thought about yourself or a thought about, oh, we're never going to get out of this, or, you know, that kind of thinking increases our sense of anxiety. And so becoming aware of them and knowing how to manage your negative thoughts and replace them with positive thinking or with a positive Bible text, you know, that is really, really important. A lot of us try to calm our anxiety with sugar. So we tend ourselves eating more sweets during this time, which does not help us with stress. So it's important. I mean, some people, and these are one of the things that I try to do is I try to eat very little or nothing between lunch and breakfast. And what that does is it helps regulate the sugar. And it's really helped me lose some weight too, by the way, in the process. When we stop caring about ourselves, you know, and stop caring even about taking care of ourselves, we let ourselves go. You know, we're not cleaning our house very well. We're not taking showers very well. We're not tending to our diets or exercise or, you know, or drinking enough water. You know, we leave the, you know, the 7, you know, basic, doctors go, you know, we stop really believing that we're worth caring enough about. You know, that is a sign of anxiety, or could be a sign of anxiety. And again, an increase in irritability is a sign of anxiety as well. So those are some things to be aware of. Now, let's talk about addiction and COVID-19, okay? Experts, researchers say that people who are recovering from substance use are facing serious relapse issues during coronavirus shelter-in-place orders. So let's think about that. You know, those of us who are recovering people, you know, what was our addiction trying to do? You know, why were many of us using in the first place? A lot of times, it was to try to medicate our pain, to deal with our stress and our anxiety to begin with. And so when there are increases in stress, what we find is that people are much more susceptible to relapse. And this is something to be very, very aware of, and even to talk about openly in our recovery groups, you know, to help people develop kind of a relapse prevention plan by being aware of their stressors. And you know, if you're feeling stressors, you know, talk to your sponsor, talk to another member of the group, go to more meetings, you know, and that's why, you know, the way we are trying to get more and more of our online meetings right now is a really, really good thing for us who are in recovery. Experts also say that the self-isolation and boredom that comes from it can be a trigger into relapse, into drug or alcohol use. So that again, boredom can be a problem. And so staying busy, connecting with people, even if it's by phone or by Zoom or whatever, connect with people. That's something that's really, really important. So going on now to the next slide. Before the COVID-19 pandemic, 130 people were dying each day in the United States from drug overdose. But now, they've not magically disappeared. In fact, a recent study by Wellbeing Trust and the American Academy of Family Physicians estimates that an additional 75,000 lives were lost due to substance use and suicide, compounded by isolation and uncertainty due to COVID-19. A 20% increase in overdose calls in Jacksonville, Florida. Just as an example, a spike in drug-related deaths in Cuyahoga County, New York, 13 overdose deaths in 5 days in Hamilton County, Ohio. All of those are an increase since COVID-19 happened. So, so that's something to be very, very aware of. Now, I want to take some time to talk about the 12 steps and trauma. How can the 12 steps be helpful during times of trauma and dealing with trauma? So now, there are books written about this subject, by the way. Now, I'm only going to give a couple of slides and have a little conversation about it. But one of the things that we need to really be sure of is that we become trained in what trauma looks like. What are the symptoms for people who have experienced trauma? And again, I shared with you 10 of the adverse childhood experiences that are forms of trauma that are experienced in childhood, as well as some of those things that happen in adulthood. So those of us who are involved in recovery, many of the people who are coming to our 12-step groups have experienced trauma. So how can we help them in a 12-step concept or construct? So first of all, the 12 steps provide a flexible structure, and we need to not be rigid in the way that we do our 12-step meetings either. So a flexible structure that promotes a positive lifestyle change. Now, some trauma survivors need more structure and others need less, okay? Now, the flexibility of the 12 steps is the only requirement for membership is a desire to stop drinking, okay? Now, using that and applying that principle to Adventist recovery ministry, the only requirement for membership is a desire what? Is a desire for health, for emotional health, to stop our addictions, because we, again, have a format that is broader than simply alcohol or drugs. We deal with codependency or sex addictions or eating addictions or anxiety or depression too, or, whatever someone wants to deal with, codependency. We deal with a broad range of things. So a requirement to get healthier, a requirement to stop those negative things. So ours is a very flexible program that's open to many different things. And all you have to do is have a desire to stop. So we give some flexibility while we give the structure of the 12 steps. We provide a welcoming, tolerant, and non-judgmental environment. In other words, it's a safe place for people to come, to share. No one's going to condemn you because we're all in this together. We're all recovering, from something. And the more powerful we can be as facilitators, it's because we share our own experience in working the program. We're not just, facilitating from theory. We're facilitating from our own experience, strength, and hope. So It's also providing sober support, a nourishing environment, and a network of recovering people where we can talk with people before the meetings, during the meetings, after the meetings. We can reach out to people if we're feeling like we might be getting close to relapse. So there's a lot of sober support. That's good for trauma. People who experience trauma need that kind of support. It also helps us overcome the isolation related to the shame connected to trauma. You know, a lot of times when people experience trauma, you know, they've been put down, they believe they're not worth much of anything. You know, they've been told negative messages about themselves. They don't have a good solid sense of self, and that trauma keeps them inward, isolated. And so a 12-step program helps them overcome that isolation through connecting with people who are in recovery and who have experienced very similar things themselves. The flexible language in the steps can be helpful in dealing with trauma. In other words, God or your higher power as you understand him. Again, we understand that, you know, from a Christian point of view, Jesus is our higher power. But if someone comes in, you know, who's not quite there yet, can we be big enough to allow them to start where they are, you know, with God as they understand them today? And honestly, for those of us who are engaging in a recovery program, for even people in our church, you know, our churches, many of us are in different places in our journey with God too. So we have different understandings of God, all the way from, you know, from perhaps more conservative understandings of God to perhaps more progressive understandings of God, more grace-filled understandings of God, fearful understandings of God. We're all, you know, all of us, depending on where we are in the journey of recovery, are in different places. I know when I started, you know, my relationship with God was based upon, you know, do's and don'ts. If you perform well enough, then God will love you. If you don't, you're going to get zapped, you know. And so I have grown through the 12-step program, you know, to understand God much more differently than when I started. So understand that people are in very, very different places. It also provides opportunity for catharsis. So when I share my story, you know, what the ACE study research showed is that if you can share your story with one other safe person and you're not condemned, you get a year's worth of benefit in the reduction of physical challenges, you know, physical disease, chronic illness, mental illness, as well as self-defeating behavioral illnesses like substance abuse or overeating or even suicidal thinking. There's a year's worth of benefit in just telling your story to someone for half an hour. So that opportunity comes in our recovery programs. However, now, it's important to also understand that there are some limitations to 12 steps with trauma survivors that we need to be aware of as well. So sometimes if people are not educated about trauma, they can be insensitive, especially, you know, some of the old timers who are used to doing things their way, the same way all the time. And, you know, if they're not educated, they can say things or do things that can be hurtful. For example, some of our slogans: take the cotton out of your ears and put it in your mouth. Okay, you know, that's a recovery slogan. Well, basically, someone who's experienced trauma, if they hear that, you're telling me to shut up, to don't talk. And in a lot of dysfunctional families where there's been trauma, you know, don't talk about the trauma, you know, shut up. And so remember, people who experience trauma filter what you say, what they hear, through their trauma lens. They're not where you may be, you know, to really understand what this might mean, you know, and the benefits of that slogan to some people, you know, who need to really learn to listen. So just being aware. Keep it simple, stupid. How many of us have heard KISS, you know? Well, when people who experience trauma are told that they're stupid, that is probably a message that they've heard before from a mother, a father, a teacher, whatever, that is something that could trigger them and they'll never come back. Okay. Just for today, one day at a time. I love that slogan. Those slogans are wonderful, but we need to understand that it's almost impossible for a trauma survivor to internalize that just because we say it. They have all kinds of fears about the future and what's going to happen tomorrow. And that anxiety is normal for trauma survivors. And we need to understand that they're going to have a hard time staying just connected for today, as much as we might, even read scripture to them and, don't worry about tomorrow. Tomorrow will take care of itself, Jesus told us. And what they do, a trauma survivor, is they'll read that scripture, they'll want to do it, but until they experience some healing, it's probably not going to be something that they'll be able to do as much as they may want to do it. Another slogan from the program: we're only as sick as our secrets. Well, trauma survivors survive by not talking, by keeping their secrets. And it's going to take a while for them to experience this group as a safe group for them. Okay? And so we need to be careful about laying that on them too heavily, because, they live by not talking. 12-step concepts that they may have trouble with are powerlessness and unmanageability. They've lived under, powerless, the first step. Their whole life has been one of powerlessness and unmanageability. And for them to admit that I'm powerless and my life's unmanageable is going to be challenging for them, at least initially in recovery. Another possible challenging concept for them would be making amends to the people who hurt them. If they are not safe people, for example, with domestic violence trauma, that would not be safe for them to do. And so we need to be wise, making amends to such people wherever possible, except when to do so would injure them or others. So are you going to be hurt by it? Those kinds of things we need to be very, very aware of, and working with people who are involved in a history of trauma or emotional dysregulation. So those are some of my initial thoughts, and we can take some questions and answers perhaps later if we don't have time now.
Okay, thank you so much, David. That is just a huge mountain of information, really, and I think we just scratched the surface, didn't we?
Mm-hmm.
That trauma is very complex. There are some very intricate issues involved, and understanding that helps us also have more compassion to help people go through the recovery process. You have something to share with us, David?
I do. This is a book I'd like to suggest. It's called Trauma and the 12 Steps. And it's a great resource for people who have a history of recovery, but who need to be educated more about trauma as well.
Thank you so much, David. Before we close the program, I will share a little bit more about our 12-step recovery program that David has discussed. The Adventist Recovery Ministries, our Journey to Wholeness program, so we'll share about that. But I want to turn our time over now to Derrick Lee, who is our Associate Director of the Adventist Community Services, and I should say the Director of the ACS Disaster Response for the North American Division of Seventh-day Adventists. And I'm very pleased to have Derrick with us. He oversees the disaster response operations, which include also the emotional and spiritual care program that ACS has, as well as the Young Adults Emergency Services Corps. In this role, Derrick directs 60 conferences and 7 unions and the Guam Micronesia Mission. He has been certified by the University of Maryland in critical incident stress management and is an approved instructor for the International Critical Incident Stress Foundation. Now, prior to joining ACS, Derrick worked in public safety as a deputy fire chief over operations for the Prince George's County Fire Department. And he served in the fire department for over 20 years, I believe. So a wealth of experience in a very high stress environment. And Derrick is married to his lovely wife, Davinia Lee, who is a professor of special education at Bowie State University. So Derrick, thank you for being with us and for sharing with us the resources available through our Adventist Community Services.
Okay, I think I'm off mute now. Good afternoon. It's a pleasure to join you all for a couple of minutes here. It is really quite an interesting time that we are going through right now. How many of us 6 months ago thought that we would be in a situation like we are in right now? Good Dr. Angie is sitting there in the office where she is for the first time in probably a number of months. I'm sitting in my basement, not in our lovely headquarters over there in Columbia, Maryland, because of the time we are going through. You know, it's interesting. I remember looking at my calendar back in, I think it was February. And I remember as I looked at my calendar, thinking to myself, wow, I'm not going to be home any weekend for the next 6 months. And, you know, as I was looking at my calendar, and lo and behold, who knew that the last 4 months would go as they have gone? And I know many of you are in a similar situation, I guess, and I'm going to try to share my screen. If, let me see here, I think we can manage that. I think it's up right now. And so, as I said, this situation has certainly affected many of us in different ways as we try to manage and go through the time we're going through. And I've talked with a number of individuals that have expressed feelings of feeling overwhelmed, depressed, afraid, etc. We've seen all of these type of emotions that have been shown over the last little bit. As Dr. Angie mentioned to you earlier, I happen to serve as the director of disaster response. And in this particular assignment, there are opportunities that I get to go into crisis areas, areas that have been affected by mass shootings, areas that have been affected by tornadoes, hurricanes, you name it. These are the type of environments that we go into. And when going into these type of environments, a lot of times we run into individuals that are experiencing what we call emotional trauma that they are going through. And many times they have similar feelings like the ones I mentioned to you earlier. They feel overwhelmed, they feel undervalued, emptied, worried, depressed, etc. And what we try to get across to these individuals is that these are normal feelings because of what you are experiencing and going through. And what we are finding right now is our conferences all over the North American division have individuals in it that are feeling these very things. And what we try to get across to them is that these are normal feelings that you're having. These are feelings that we actually would expect if we were to map this thing out. If we had a community that was going through some of the trauma that we are going through, it would be normal for these individuals to have feelings much like the ones that we just expressed here. Now, the question is, what do you do when going through things like this? What can you do when going through things like this? And we've just got some quick suggestions for you that I thought it would be applicable to go through with you. And our hope is that you'll pass this word on to those that you are in close proximity to, because these are things that we think can be of help and support to any individual that is going through what is viewed as a crisis event, which is what this is that we are going through right now. And you'll see some of the bullets that I have up there, starting with look for those that are talking recovery rather than recession. And this is something that we encourage not only those of us that work for the North American Division, but the general population. Look for those that are talking recovery. Get with those individuals. And unfortunately, we're not able to get together in large groups anymore. And so you may have to take advantage of some of the technology like this right here, this Zoom meeting. Use that phone that you have. Talk to individuals that are willing to talk recovery. You know, even, not even, but the Bible tells us over in Proverbs 17:22, merry heart does the body well. Discussing things with people in a positive fashion is a positive part, or can play a positive part in your general attitude. The second bullet there, make adjustments to feel better. Use your creative juices, so to speak. When this pandemic started, it was back in early March, if you recall. And unfortunately for me, I happened to be on a cruise. Now, generally, that would be a good thing, I guess. My wife was celebrating her 50th birthday. And what she wanted for her present was to go to Antarctica. And so I booked this trip. And off we head to Antarctica. Well, right in the middle, this pandemic hit. And all of a sudden, ports of entry started saying they weren't going to let us get off at those ports. And so we turned the ship around, the captain turned the ship around and headed back. Well, then all of the ports denied us entry and said, no, you can't get off. And so I was stuck on a cruise ship for about a month. And when I say stuck, I mean quarantined to my room. It was a small room. I probably went cheap and got the cheapest room that they had on the boat. And because of that, I was stuck in a room of about 100 square feet. I'm talking a room that was extremely small. And I was in that environment for 2 solid weeks, did not get out of that room. I did not even have a window in that room. And so it was a very confining situation, as you might imagine. And I tend to be an active individual. I tend to like to run and get out and talk to people. And I was stuck in an environment that did not give me the ability to do that. And so you know what I had to do? I had to come up with some creative ways of dealing with that, because I thought it was going to drive me completely out of my mind being in an environment like that. But I thought about it and said, you know, this is the situation that I'm in. And so we're going to have to come up with something as to how we're going to get through this thing. And so that's what we did. We came up with some creative ways that we could get through that. Even working out in a small environment like that. That's something that I did. I never would have thought I would have been able to do something like that, but you get creative when you have to. And so as we're going through this time, take some time to think about what are some of the things that you could do to get you through the trauma or crisis event that we have found ourselves in the middle of right now. Some of the other things you can do, move toward a positive goal. Set some positive goals for yourself that you can put in place and come up with tangible things that you can do to get through the trauma, the bit of trauma that we're going through right now. Number 4 is much like number 1, get with healthy people and have some conversations. Again, we're not able to get together in many cases, but you can call someone. You can take advantage of Zoom. That's something that I've seen many families do. It's interesting. Someone told me just the other day, they said, you know, I've talked more to my family within the last 4 months than I have in the last, oh my goodness, decade. Because of this situation right here, because we're all going through a time. And so coming up with how we can get together in a safe fashion is something that we all can do. And so, again, these are things that you can come up with on your own that make this time we're going through somewhat more handleable. And you can see the last bullet there, emotional spiritual care providers are available through Adventist Community Services. We have conferences all over the North American division, and the North American division includes the United States, Canada, Bermuda, Guam, and the Micronesian Islands. And so if you happen to be in that area, reach out to your Adventist Community Services team, and they will certainly put you in contact with individuals that can be of help and support to you as you go through this particular time that we have found ourselves in the middle of right now. If you're not able to take advantage, or you don't have an emotional spiritual care Adventist Community Services team in your area, you can certainly reach out to me here at the North American Division, and I will put you in contact with one of our emotional spiritual care providers that can provide you some of the support that will help you as we go through this challenging time that we have found ourselves in right now. So I think that's my 10 minutes, and I will turn it back over to Dr. Angie. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Derrick, for sharing your personal story too, and how you found those creative ways of overcoming that situation. And we were all certainly praying very much for you.
Amen.
And Davinia during that time.
We felt that. We felt that. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And we will also link to to your resources on our website. Just as a reminder to everybody, we are recording these presentations. They will be posted on our website in a few days. It's the same site where you registered for this event. But what we want to do now is transition to our breakout sessions. For those of you who have attended our series in the past, you know that we have our breakout sessions where we get into small groups and we have a conversation on just one question. And the time always goes by too quickly. So we're going to give you 15 minutes in your breakout groups to answer one question. You will have a group leader who will introduce themselves once you get into your group. And this is where we're getting practical. This is where we're going to take the information we just learned and discuss how are we now going to put this into practice? How is this going to affect how we as a church family function? So Phil, if you can go ahead and send us all to our breakout groups.
You know, educating people about emotional recovery, educating people about healing, understanding that we're all broken, you know, that we all are on a journey of healing, to try to normalize that, you know, for people. Even we had a pastor in our group, Hazel, who said that you know, she takes the leadership as pastor in sharing parts of her story to try and help other people understand that even as pastors, you know, we have our own brokenness and we're on a journey of healing. So educating people, introducing them, you know, to the 12 steps, and doing it perhaps gradually, you know, having even like a recovery weekend. You know, we might have to do it via Zoom now, but, you know, but trying to educate us more and more about brokenness, about the advantages of recovery, about vulnerability, and the advantages of simply talking and sharing about our emotional stories and finding that we're not alone. I mean, those are some of the kinds of things that we talked about in our group.
Let's go to Carolina. She had the same question in her group as well. Thank you, Carolina.
Sure. We had participants from all over the U.S., strong Canadian representation, and someone from Zambia, I believe. And we are all in agreement. We have a mix of members that are from small churches and large churches, and generally everyone felt that they have very friendly churches and that they're welcoming and loving. On maybe a superficial level, you know, everyone's accepting, welcoming, but when it comes to emotional issues, our churches are not prepared to understand and to relate to people that are going through problems, and mental health problems or trauma. And so sometimes our members may come across as trying to say something loving that it comes out as judgmental to the person that is receiving, on the receiving end, and they may feel hurt. And so in general terms, we're not prepared as a church to learn how to relate to others that are going through mental health issues. That's in a nutshell. People had different experiences, but overall, we're not prepared. We need to learn how to communicate, how to be more understanding and loving past that superficial level.
Thank you so much, Carolina, for pointing out a very important need. And I think many, if not all of our churches have that, at least to some extent. And that really dovetails into our next question that two groups addressed. And this question is, what can be done to increase awareness of emotional trauma among our churches, and also to help them find healing? And so we first will go to Pastor Ray Nelson, who is our Recovery Ministries coordinator. So thank you, Pastor Ray.
You're welcome. It's good to be with you today. A person mentioned that it's of utmost importance to be able to identify the person that may be going through trauma. In other words, the members of the church. It was mentioned that we need to know the congregation, that when we see subtle changes in a person's life, then particularly if these changes are indications that they may be going through trauma, that we need to be able to let them know that we are available to help. We really need training in our churches. We need education, and we need someone who can listen, who is safe. The information that the person may share in their story, their past, and what they're dealing with at the present time, that information needs to be kept in utmost confidence and not shared with another individual. I mentioned that we really need to be as careful in keeping confidence as health professionals are in a hospital setting or in a doctor's office. Also, I mentioned that there's a resource that's available that might be quite helpful, and that is Mental Health First Aid. It's an organization that began in Australia, and there's a Mental Health First Aid USA, and I'm quite sure there must be an organization similar to that in Canada, and that if a person simply Googles Mental Health First Aid, they'll be able to access the website and find a local organization that is probably available to provide the training. Or regularly they schedule a 2-day workshop. Generally it's about eight hours of training, and it's a wonderful organization. Of course, David, Dr. Sedlacek mentioned the importance and value of the Adventist Recovery Ministries. And I believe Tamika wanted to share something additionally.
So brethren, I wanted to point out that I'm in Canada as my group. I told my group, but the reality is for us is that I'm some of this 12-step thing that to which the doctor gave us today, presented on. It's the first time hearing about these things, and I'm thankful for the presentation. It was really good. It's just now that we need to implement these in our churches, and for people to understand that there's an avenue or there's a space that they can speak their truth, and they know that it is safe there. The group earlier spoke about being vulnerable, But as Christians, we find that sometimes that's not necessarily the case. We don't tend to be vulnerable with each other. But that's somewhere we have to be, that we can be able to speak our truths about our emotional trauma.
Thank
That's
you,
what I
Tamika.
wanted to say. Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you.
And Angie, Dr. Brower, I believe she's going to mention a little bit more about our online training that's soon going to be available for the Adventist Recovery Ministries Journey to Wholeness facilitators.
Thank you so much, Pastor Ray, and also Tamika for your comments as well. And yes, I will mention a little bit more about that, but let's go to our second group with Dr. Joseph, who is our Health Ministries Director for the Atlantic Union Conference. And your group had the same question as Pastor Ray, so thank you for sharing with us your conversation.
Very much. We had a nice group and we discussed the possibility to have those information. When in the churches we have vibrant information available, we have to find a way to get the attention of the members of the community so that they can be aware of those resources available in our church. Like, by example, using some kind of video showing in maybe a few seconds or 1 minute what's going on the church, what we are going to do. We have to we have to be able to talk about that. Let the people know what we have available so that they could be interested to join us. We have to use the media available like Zoom that we are using right now, because people could not come in sometimes, but from their house, they can follow the program we have. We can form little groups so that people can be more comfortable to share or their information, to share their feelings, and to get support. And we can invite also some experts so that they can give advice to the people. So we have been discussing a lot of possibilities to make the church relevant and to help people. I know that there are other members who are willing to add something, so I leave it open to other members to talk also.
Thank you so much, Dr. Joseph. Those are really important points. Do we have anyone else from the group wanting to share?
Derrick, you can speak. Derrick was there also.
Dr. Joseph summarized what we talked about. I think that one of the things that I would want to stress is that among our churches, we just need to talk about some of these challenges that we know our members and others are going through. And the hope is us coming together and talking about some of the challenges will elicit some of the resources that are out there. And I'm not just talking about internally within our church, but there are resources even outside that if we start talking about, we'll start knowing about and hopefully take advantage of using. That's the hope anyway.
Thank you very much.
Thank you both so much, and thank you to your group as well. I think what we've had with these two groups discussing is that there's a need within our church, but we need to also take it outside of our church. There is also community around us that is in the same need as we are. So very important that we consider both of these aspects. Well, we're going to go to our third and final question, and I don't know about you, Paul, but my group sure thought this was a very difficult question. So I'm going to ask Paul Lehman. He is our coordinator for our Collegiate Advocates for Better Living program. And the question for your group and mine, Paul, is how is emotional healing connected to the mission of the Adventist Church? Thank you, Paul, for being with us.
Thank you. Yeah, this started out fairly silent because it, like you said, it was a little bit difficult because it's kind of multifaceted, because it has to do with emotional healing and you have to deal with the mission of the church. And I want to thank Pamela especially. She kind of pulled this together. She said, our mission, of course, is to teach baptized, and I love the word that she used, is to give restoration. And I think the part that kind of came through as a theme, and then I'll focus on a couple specific points. One of the themes that came through was that church members started to actually maybe get out of their comfort zone a little bit, or to come up with new ideas of how they could enhance what's happening at the church within the framework of COVID. So some of the things that they realized, of course, some of them work with seniors, that these people are generally lonely, and they were really lonely. So they started to connect with them in a special way that way. They also started to study the Sabbath school lesson online together as a group. And one of the churches did a feeding program, which we've seen a lot, of course, come through the NAD on churches that are doing this, but this was happening in Bermuda specifically. And another idea that happened, that arose out of this all, was there were Bible studies being offered. I think it was Marie that mentioned this. She does 3 Bible studies on Monday for different age groups for people that want to actually join that. But the Bible studies have now kind of morphed into getting non-church members starting to study the Bible with that group. And so these people would start to invite their non-Adventist friends and neighbors to become part of this. And
well, I'll share as we close up here with this portion what our group talked about. And we also had a very difficult time with this question. So thank you all for tackling this one. And I want to thank Walda especially. She spoke from her 30 years of experience working in a hospital emergency and providing trauma care. And one of the issues that was brought up is that in order to serve others, again, that is part of our mission of the church, is that we need to be open about ourselves. We need to have that awareness of our own personal difficulties, the challenges that we ourselves are handling and managing and maybe even recovering from. So an awareness of our own need will help us then to reach out to others when we're ministering to their needs. And also that for those who have gone through difficult life situations, it's important to know that it may be difficult for them to reach out in a spiritual way, to reach out for spiritual things. If they have mental health issues that they were not responsible for, you know, there are some that are inherited. There are some because of the trauma that we've heard about. Where do we find them in that readiness level to reach out on spiritual things? And how do we even know when they are hurting with these things, when it is so difficult for us? It's often not safe for anyone to really be open and share. So it is so important that we create that safe atmosphere in our churches. But we also had this very interesting conversation about the types of questions that people are asking at this time, and also those who have gone through traumatic experiences. The question of, why did God let this happen to me? And where was He when I was hurting? Where was God when somebody was doing XYZ to me? And what we came to realize is those are the same types of questions that many people ask when they are questioning God, when they are questioning the need for faith. And so one of the recommendations that came up is, why don't we point them to the life of Christ. We could take, for example, Christ on the cross, where he cried out, my God, why have you forsaken me?" So Christ himself felt that emotional separation, even though God had not left him, but yet he felt that way. And so as we explore the life of Christ with these individuals and share with them what he went through, perhaps they can find a hope that God did not leave him, so he won't leave them, because Christ came to rescue them. So it's again looking to Christ, looking to Jesus. And you know, that really reminded me of the verse in Hebrews chapter 4 and verse 15, which says, "For we do not have a high priest who cannot be touched with the feelings of our infirmities, but was in all points tempted as we are, yet without sin." And that is a great hope that we all need for our own lives as we journey through the situations we're going through. But it is also the great hope that we can share with others, that Christ knows exactly what they have gone through, even when there is no other human being around them to help, that Christ understands, and he is ministering on their behalf. These are beautiful truths that we need to remind ourselves of sometimes. So, well, we do need to end here. We are going to just have a closing prayer for those who may need to leave. And then we will have some time for questions and answers for those who are able to stay on for just a few minutes. But before we do close, I do want to share with you about our recovery program. I'm sharing on the screen now. This is a support group meeting that we have for our Journey to Wholeness facilitators. Journey to Wholeness is the Seventh-day Adventist Church's 12-step recovery program that Dr. David was speaking about in his presentation. And we train facilitators, and we encourage our churches to have these to have these Journey to Wholeness groups. We now have many groups that are meeting online through Zoom or other other modes. And so our next meeting for these group facilitators is tomorrow afternoon. You can learn more about the Journey to Wholeness program, our addiction recovery resources, as well as this meeting tomorrow on our website, nadhealth.org/recovery. And we are also soon to release an online training. So that way it's much more accessible. It can be done at any time. And so if you sign up for our email newsletter, which can also be done on our website, nadhealth.org, we can send out information as soon as that is ready. I also want you to know that our next Ministry Goals meeting will be on Tuesday, September 1st. We are not having a session in August. The next one will be Tuesday, September 1st. You can go to nadhealth.org/ministry goals. That is also where you can find the recording for today's session. So we encourage you to go there to share the recording with others, and also to look for information for our upcoming session. Our topic for our September 1 meeting is the issue of burnout. So another very important topic that we're going to be addressing just as schools are starting to open for some of us and our family members. Well, we're going to have a closing prayer. I'm going to ask Elder Derrick Lee if you would close with us. And again, those of you who need to leave, thank you for being with us. Those of you who have some questions for our presenters will be staying by for a few more minutes afterwards. Thank you so much for being with us.
Okay, let's bow our heads. Dear Lord and Father, we say thank you for the opportunity which you have graciously laid before us. We ask that you would be with us as we interpret the information that has gone before us this afternoon. Help us to use your wisdom as we attempt to figure out how to use it best to serve you and to ultimately bring those that are out there closer to you, Father. We thank thee for hearing and answering us as you always do. We ask that you would be with each individual here with us this afternoon. Give them what they stand in need of so that ultimately we can bring others to you. We thank thee for hearing and answering it. In thy Son's name we most humbly pray. Amen.
Amen. Thank you so much. Okay, well, we are going to go to our questions. I know a few questions have been put into our chat message. If you also have a question, if you could just raise your hand, and if you can use the raise hand function, that's the easiest way for us to spot your hand. But let's see, we've had some questions to see if our presenters are willing to share their slides. So we will speak with them, and if possible, we'll make them available on the website. Let's see. Okay, this is a question for Dr. Sedlacek. How may we assist someone whose trust was betrayed and is now experiencing emotional trauma and becoming a recluse?
That is a really good question. There are a lot of broken people who have a hard time trusting because of betrayal. And one of the things that they need is to know that there is consistency, that there's going to be someone that they can trust. Trust is earned. Just having someone say, well, trust me, that's where they've gotten in trouble before. And so having someone demonstrate that they are trustworthy is a way of earning someone's trust. And again, just because someone comes into our church doesn't mean that they know that our church is safe. And there are some churches, as we've heard today, that aren't yet. And so making our churches safe so that people, when they can come in, can learn that they're safe with us, that they can trust us. That's going to build trust. At the same time, though, if someone is becoming a recluse because of it, I would have some concerns. They need to be reached out to because sometimes, when people don't trust, they need someone to pursue them. Some people have never had anyone pursue them because they don't think they're important enough to be pursued. And so having people reach out to them to say, even if you're not going to reach out and talk to me, I'm going to reach out and talk to you. Until they say no. I mean, that's really important. But also to understand our boundaries, that we're not professionals, that if someone is isolating, if they're becoming seriously depressed, if they are talking about hurting themselves, then we need to go beyond what we can do and connect them with either a professional counselor, get them to an emergency room so that they can be assessed for whether they need even a higher level of treatment than what we can provide.
Thank you very much, David. Would you mind adding just a little bit, how can we get someone who we think needs professional help, but they're resistant? How can we help them recognize that need?
Well, we may not be able to. I mean, that's one reality that we need to face. However, a part of what we need to do for many people is to normalize the idea that counseling is not something evil and awful and scary. And I mean, it might be frightening to a certain degree, but it's helpful to be able to talk and to share, what's going on with you. There's relief that comes with that. And so a lot of times in our church, there's been this kind of dichotomy between, well, if you just have enough faith, you won't need to talk to somebody. You won't need, a professional counseling. And that's a false dichotomy. And to be able to say to people, look, yes, I know you love God, but you're struggling, and to help them know that it's not a denial of your faith to go to a professional counselor. It actually can be an expression of faith to go to a counselor who is someone who loves God, who's going to connect you with God more deeply and teach you how to grow and how to heal, even in a Christian, from a Christian framework.
Thank you so much, David. I think it's very important that we do understand the need to normalize, as you said, counseling and professional help. These are important resources. In fact, I have to share this. Just this morning in the beautiful book, Thoughts from the Mount of Blessings, we read that God works through human instrumentalities. So he uses each other to bless and to bring healing to one another. So counseling is another opportunity for that to happen. We have another question here. I would like to know what free resources are available through the church for individual counseling, educational programs, etc. Many people may not be able to access resources due to financial barriers. So either David or Derrick, any resources that you could help point to?
Derrick, you want to take a shot at that first, please?
Sorry about that. I was on mute. Well, as far as free resources go, and within Adventist Community Services, we do offer emotional and spiritual care support to communities that go through various crisis events. And it just so happens that all of the conferences that we have within the North American Division right now are going through a crisis event. And as I mentioned to you, we have emotional and spiritual care providers that are available around the division that can give a bit of support to communities that are experiencing this bit of trauma that we have found ourselves in. And so I would highly recommend that you reach out to your Adventist Community Services team leads and find out how that bit of help can be tapped right now. And one of the jobs that we have as emotional spiritual care providers is when we run into a situation that is deeper than we are able to help you through, is linking you up with some of that professional care that the good doctor mentioned. And that's part of our responsibility as emotional and spiritual care providers, is linking those individuals up with professional care when needed. I'll just give you a quick example. We were at one of the mass shootings that took place here in the United States. And we started rendering some care to one of the particular individuals. And as we were talking to them and communicating with them, we realized that they were in much deeper than we were going to be able to get them through. And so what we ended up doing was linking them up with a mental health therapist. And it was through that interaction that they were able to come up out of the trauma that they are going through. And actually, and it's been about 1.5 years now, they are still receiving some of that care. Part of our job is getting that, we're kind of a bridge, trying to get them through this period of trauma that they're going through. And when we see that they need more than we can offer, we need to link them up with the appropriate care. And so we try to do that as best we can. And that's a free service that we offer as a church.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Derrick. That's that's a huge resource that we have available. Can you tell us your website, or is there someplace we can go to find more information?
Yes, if you go to AdventistCommunityServices.org, that's our website, and go into emotional and spiritual care. In addition to that, if you'll allow me to share my screen, it will have, you can see right here, there's my contact information. You can certainly reach out by cell phone or just send me an email, and we will go about linking you up with an individual that can assist you through. But AdventistCommunityServices.org is our website, and certainly you can take advantage of that as well.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Please do take a picture of that screen before it disappears, just in case you need to share that resource with someone. We have another question here, and I think this will be our final question, of how to help a husband who is caring for his wife with bipolar, mental illness, or depression during this pandemic. How to help the husband who's caring for his wife.
I would like to suggest that National Institute of Mental Illness, which is a part of SAMHSA, Substance Abuse and Mental Health Administration, has some excellent free resources about that subject on their website. And not only resources on their website, but they also have groups for family members who need to talk. And I would guess that right now those groups are being held via Zoom as well. So I would suggest visiting their website and searching for where those family groups are to support other family members who are suffering from mental illness, because we know that family members need help themselves caring for a loved one who's mentally ill.
Thank you so much, David, for that. I did put the link there for the National Institute of Mental Health, so you can look there for some resources. We did have one more question about our September 1st meeting. It will be at 4 p.m. Eastern, and our plan is to go to about 5:45 p.m. So we will have the registration for that on our website in just a few days, as well as the recording from today's session. So thank you all again for spending a part of your day with us, addressing this very important issue. Unfortunately, it's often an overlooked issue, but I hope that we've all feel that we have a little bit more that we can work with as we now go to next steps. And I pray for each one of you that God will give you strength to help you in your ministry goals in this area or in the area that He is calling you to serve. Thank you all for being with us. I wish you safety, peace, and blessings until the next time. God bless.